This time on GeekPod Blue.
Warning, station is now code blue.
Hello and welcome to this edition of GeekPod Blue. I am your host, Hugh, and today we are going to talk about Krampus, or however you want to pronounce it. It's German, so who actually knows? Except for Germans, they probably know. Now, when I told my wife that I was going to be doing this crazy event series, and I brought up Krampus, she goes, that sounds like something I get on my period. And I'm like, I already planned on making that joke, but now you can make it, and it doesn't make me look as bad. But yes, Krampus is basically the anti-Santa Claus, and if you've been paying attention in pop culture, there's certainly been a resurgence in the Krampus myth in the last few years. Not only just in movies, but even as far, and I have to say the first time I ever heard of Krampus was when Anthony Bourdain talked about it, and he did a whole little animated Krampus short that they couldn't show on TV because it was too scary for his show. I believe it was No Reservations at that time. It was before he made the jump to CNN. But Krampus is basically, like I said, the anti-Santa Claus. Now, in folklore, Krampus is a horned figure described as half goat, half demon. And during the Christmas season, he punishes wicked little children who have misbehaved, as opposed to Santa Claus, who rewards the well-behaved with gifts and candies and things like that. Krampus is one of the companions of St. Nicholas, and in several countries he is put in folklore like Austria, Croatia, Hungary, and such. The origin of the figure is a little unclear, but we have some ideas, and we do think that some anthropologists have postulated that it's a pre-Christian idea that was folded into modern society, much like other aspects of the Santa Claus myth. Now, traditionally there are parades, they're called like Krampslauf, where people will dress up as Krampus and they'll run around towns and things like that. Certainly that's a modern day thing. That wasn't always allowed. There was actually a point in time where Krampus celebrations were prohibited, but more on that in just a moment. The history of the Krampus figure has been postulated to stretch back to the pre-Christian Alpine traditions. In a brief article discussing Krampus, Maurice Bruce wrote, "There seems to be little doubt to his true identity, for in no other form is the full regalia of the horned god of the witches so well preserved. The birch, apart from its phallic significance, may have a connection with the initiation rites of certain witch covens, rites which entailed binding and scourging as a form of mock death. And the chains could have been introduced in a Christian attempt to bind the devil. But again, that could be a remnant of pagan initiation rites." Another writer, and I'm pulling this right from Wikipedia, discussed his observations in 1975 in a small town in Styria called Ernding. It was anthropologist John J. Honigman wrote, "The St. Nicholas festival we are describing incorporates cultural elements widely distributed in Europe, in some cases going back to pre-Christian times. Nicholas himself became popular in Germany around the 11th century. The feast dedicated to this patron of children is only one winter occasion in which children are the objects of special attention, others being Martinmas and the Feast of Holy Innocents. And New Year's Day, masked devils acting boisterously and making nuisances of themselves are known in Germany since at least the 16th century, while animal masked devils combining dreadful comic antics appeared in medieval church plays." I have to say, masked devils asking boisterously and making nuisances of themselves sounds like Syracuse most of the time. A large literature, much of it by European folklorists, bears on these subjects. Austrians in the community we studied are quite aware of the heathen elements being blended with the Christian elements in the St. Nicholas customs and in other traditional winter ceremonies. They believe Krampus derives from a pagan supernatural who was assimilated into the Christian devil. So they believe that, much like in the previous episode, we talked about how Santa was combined with another figure. Krampus was kind of combined with the devil to create a cohesive narrative for the religions. Now, Krampus, the original Krampus figures, were persisted in the 17th century, up until the 17th century. And at that point, it had been incorporated into the Christian winter celebrations, pairing him up with Santa Claus. Now, there was some issues because, like I said, Krampus was outlawed at one point in Europe. After the 1923 elections, the Krampus tradition was prohibited because they felt that Krampus was an evil man, and it was a bad thing to be celebrating that and pushing that. But in the 1950s, they were still saying, hey, Krampus is an evil man. But like most things, it started being revived. First in Bavaria with local artistic traditions, people making hand-carved wooden masks and things like that. The countries of the former Habsburg Empire largely borrowed the tradition of Krampus, who accompanied St. Nicholas on the 5th of December from Austria. Krampus himself historically comes around the night of December 5th, tagging along with St. Nicholas. As we know, December 6th was St. Nicholas's birthday, so of course he shows up the night before. He visits all the houses that night with his pal, and while St. Nick is on hand to put candy into the shoes of good kids and birch twigs, in the shoes of bad, Krampus, his specialty is punishing kids. And a legend has it throughout the Christmas season, misbehaved kids are beaten with birch branches or can disappear, stuffed into Krampus' sack and hauled off to his lair, or tortured or eaten. Yes, Auntie Santy eats the evil children. That's, man, people in history are fucked up. Basically, you've got God and the devil is what we're seeing, with Santa Claus. We're seeing the good represented by Santa Claus and the bad represented by, Krampus. Now, Krampus roots have nothing to do with Christmas, even though they're tied into it. As I've said, they date back to pre-Germanic paganism in that region. The name originates with the German Krampen, which means claw. And tradition has it that he is the son of the Norse god of the underworld, Hell. During the 12th century, the Catholic Church attempted to banish Krampus celebrations, like we said, even before, because of his resemblance to the devil. More eradication attempts followed in 1934 at the hands of Austria's conservative Christian Social Party. But you can't keep a good bad guy down. Much like Freddy Krueger, he continued coming back all the time. Now, when they have these celebrations and these parades and their child hunting, as they call it, some think it's fun. They do have concerns that some of the refugees in the towns could find the tradition frightful and it might scare people. Now, when they decide to have these festivals, they're getting, refugees, tourists, all this stuff. So what they started doing is they would put out literature just letting people know that, hey, we're not really evil. All we're doing is, celebrating this tradition because they didn't want to scare people off. Moving on to more traditions, and this is quite interesting. In the 1900s, the idea of giving Krampus cards at Christmas became very commonplace. Now, while he's, generally shown in many forms, the most common one is kind of like the devil, covered in hair, black or brown. He has cloven hooves and horns, a long pointed tail, and he carries chains. Maybe to drag the kids away, maybe binding by the devil, whatever. But what would happen is people would start giving out Krampus cards at Christmas. Rather than Christmas cards, you would receive Krampus cards, which would have pictures of Krampus with his chains and his long tongue, spanking a child or hauling them away, things like that. Pretty scary stuff. I guess I'm kind of glad that that turned into traditional Christmas cards, because that is a little scary. Moving on to other Krampus celebrations or traditions or myths, it's customary to offer a Krampus schnapps, which is a strong distilled fruit brandy, to everybody over the holiday season. Hopefully that keeps Krampus away and he does not hurt you in any way, shape, or form. There's also lots of other greeting cards, not just children, but of Krampus pursuing busty women and things like that. Some very overt sexual overtones, which I find interesting because you don't really see that in other representations of the devil. They never have the devil chasing around. Well, in tattoos, I guess. In American traditional tattoos, you might see stuff like that, but the devil chasing busty ladies is not something you expect from the early 1900s. There are other variations in the region. In Styria, there's something called Ruten bundles, which are presented by Krampus to families, and they're twigs that are painted gold and displayed year-round in the house. And it's a reminder to any kid who has forgotten about Krampus, that, hey, you better behave, or on December 5th, Krampus might put you in a sack and take you to hell, or drown you, or eat you, because that's fucked up. Now, in North America, we're starting to see a huge resurgence in, first of all, knowledge of Krampus, but people celebrating it. Now, recently there have been, bar crawls, toy drives, fundraisers, and celebrations in North America. In just a few cities, these cities here I'm about to read, like Washington, D.C., Toronto, Chicago, L.A., San Francisco, Dallas, Philadelphia, and Edmonton have all had Krampus nights or some sort of Krampus celebration. Which, just goes to show, America is good at appropriating other people's cultures and kind of turning it into something else. Now, I don't say that in a bad way, because I enjoyed the Krampus movie, and I enjoyed a Christmas horror movie, or a horror story. I forget if it's movie or story. I mentioned that last week. I think it's on Netflix. You definitely need to check that out, because it's awesome. Now, Krampus has shown up in some other countries. Like in Croatia, they've described him as a devil wearing a cloth sack around his waist and chains around his neck, ankles, and wrists. And it's part of a tradition. When a child receives a gift from St. Nicholas, he's given a golden branch to represent his good deeds. However, if the child is misbehaved, Krampus will take the gifts and leave only a silver branch to represent the child's bad acts, because, silver isn't worth as much as gold, but a poor kid in Croatia, he's going to take that as a punishment rather than go hawk that silver branch and buy food for his family for the rest of the year. I think I'd take the silver branch. I'd be okay with that. It wouldn't bother me. Let's see. Other parts. There are other characters that come along in the Krampus story, I guess. Along with St. Nicholas, there's a woodsman, there's angels, there's all sorts of different characters that feed into these plays and these parades that they do. And he's even been in popular culture. Now, I'm not going to go through a list of stuff. We talked about the movie. Everyone knows one of my favorite TV shows is Supernatural, and Krampus even appeared on Supernatural back in season 3, and they end up having to track down Krampus because he's an ancient pagan god, and people are disappearing, and Sam and Dean have to end him. Now, I'm told that he's appeared in many other things like Family Guy and The Simpsons. I haven't watched those episodes because I don't watch those shows, but it certainly goes to show, even before Krampus was widely known, there were people who were creating content here in the United States who were aware of this tradition. And that's probably why it's been pulled into our popular culture and social conscience, if you will, because of all of these appearances that Krampus has made in other media. And that's going to wrap up our little history of Krampus. I don't know if you've been naughty or you've been nice. I'm guessing most of the people I know are on the naughty list. You may want to watch out, because Krampus might be giving you a visit this year. And there's my phone again, just like clockwork. Hold on, let's see what Paul has to say today.
Text from Paul, everybody loves to get text from Paul. Text from Paul, everybody loves to get text from Paul. Show wins.
And Paul says today, on the third day of Christmas, my Hugh friend gave to me 3 text messages ending in, "It's like I don't even know you anymore."
Text from Paul, everybody loves to get text from Paul. Text from Paul, everybody loves to get text from Paul. Show wins.
And that is going to wrap things up for today. Make sure you tune in tomorrow when I will have more Christmas goodness heading your way. Till then, tuck and roll, kids.
GeekPod Blue is a GeekPod Network production. Executive producers Paul Showens and Hugh Allen. Concept created by Paul Showens and Hugh Allen. Intro is Opportunity by Jamus Breed. Closing is Bucket by Jamus Breed. Both licensed for use by Dennis Johnston. Want to help the show? Leave a 5-star rating on iTunes. GeekPod can be reached at contribute@geekpod.com or send us a tweet at GeekPod. That's G33kpod. You can also find GeekPod on Facebook and Instagram. G33kpod. That's G33kpod.